What happens when a man born into privilege, raised in palaces, and celebrated across the world is told that the very title that defines him is about to be stripped away? That's not a fairy tale. That's not a myth. That's the chilling reality facing Prince Harry as King Charles allegedly prepares to downgrade his son from the globally recognized Duke of Sussex to the obscure Earl of Dumbarton. Shocking? Of course. But even more shocking is the timing, the symbolism, and the very personal sting buried inside this announcement. Because let's be honest, Harry's journey has always been one of contradictions. He was the spare, the soldier, the rebel, the husband who broke free, the father who chose California over the crown. But through all of it, one thing remained untouched: his dukedom. The title bestowed on him on his wedding day, the badge that tied him forever to the royal machine, even when he tried to walk away. And now, even that is under threat. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Pause for a second and ask yourself, what would you do if your own father, the King of England no less, sat in a private meeting and said your identity, your status, your very name in history books, was about to be erased? Can you imagine the humiliation? Can you imagine the ripple effect, not just for Harry, but for Meghan, for their children, and for the very brand they've tried to build across the Atlantic? This isn't just a story about a name. It's about power. It's about punishment. It's about a monarchy sending a clear message. Loyalty is rewarded, defiance is crushed. And Harry, well, Harry is learning that lesson in the harshest way possible. Let's rewind for a moment, though, because to understand the gravity of this moment, we need to go back to the beginning. May 19th, 2018. The world tuned in to watch Harry marry Meghan Markle, a glamorous Hollywood actress stepping into the ancient halls of Windsor Castle, a symbol of modernity crashing against centuries of tradition. The cameras caught every smile, every tear, every whispered vow. And at the end of that spectacle, Queen Elizabeth granted Harry the title of Duke of Sussex. It wasn't just an honor, it was history repeating itself, a nod to dukedoms given to younger sons of monarchs throughout time. That title carried weight. It carried prestige. It gave Harry and Meghan a platform, a name they could take to the world stage. Sussex became more than a title, it became a brand. The Sussex Royal Foundation, the Sussex Instagram account that broke records, the global tours where they were welcomed as representatives of the crown. And even after they stepped away, even after the bombshell interviews, even after the Netflix deals, the Spotify contracts, the book that tore into family secrets, Sussex still clung to them. Like a lifeline. But lifelines can be cut. And that's exactly what King Charles is now allegedly prepared to do. Why now? Why, after years of scandals and estrangement, would the king decide this is the moment to strip Harry's most valuable title? Is it revenge? Is it strategy? Or is it simply the unavoidable consequence of Harry's relentless rebellion? Imagine the scene. A private meeting, hushed voices behind heavy palace doors. Senior courtiers gathered, documents on the table, the king presiding like a judge in a courtroom. The decision being weighed. Should Harry remain Duke of Sussex? Or should he be reduced to Earl of Dumbarton? The contrast couldn't be sharper. Sussex, historic, globally known, tied to grandeur. Dumbarton, smaller, obscure, unfamiliar to most outside Scotland. It's like being moved from the spotlight to the shadows, from the main stage to the sidelines. And let's not forget Meghan. For her, the Duchess of Sussex title is more than just ceremonial. It's currency. It's recognition. It's the badge she wears in Hollywood, the title she introduces herself with on the world stage. How does Meghan, Duchess of Dumbarton, sound to you? Does it carry the same power? The same sparkle? Of course not. And Meghan knows it. That's why this announcement, if true, is more than just a royal reshuffling. It's a humiliation. A deliberate swipe at the Sussexes' carefully curated image. But here's the twist. Some argue this isn't just about Harry. It's about the monarchy itself. By demoting him, Charles sends a message to the world and to his own family. Defection comes at a cost. Betrayal will not go unpunished. And for those still within the royal fold, William, Kate, even the younger royals watching from the wings, it's a warning. Stay loyal or risk everything. Of course, critics will argue the opposite. They'll say this is cruel, unnecessary, even dangerous. Because every time the monarchy takes a swipe at Harry, it risks looking vindictive, petty, outdated. And in an age where public opinion can make or break institutions, can the crown really afford another round of cold-hearted monarchy versus victimized Harry? It's a gamble, no doubt. And yet, Charles seems prepared to take it. Perhaps because he knows the Sussex brand has already outgrown the monarchy's control. Perhaps because he believes Harry can no longer be both insider and outsider. Or perhaps because, at the heart of it, this is personal. A father betrayed by his son. A king protecting his throne. But let's ask the real question here. What happens to Harry if this goes through? What happens to the man who defined himself as the Duke of Sussex, suddenly waking up as the Earl of Dumbarton? Would it change his life in California? Would it impact his deals, his reputation, his children's futures? Maybe. Maybe not. But symbolically, it's devastating. It's the monarchy erasing him from the history he was born into. And yet, one detail makes this story even more dramatic. The title, Earl of Dumbarton, wasn't chosen at random. It's not just any demotion. It has history, it has symbolism, and it carries an irony that will make Harry wince. Because once upon a time, Dumbarton was offered for Archie, Harry and Meghan's son, and Meghan reportedly rejected it. She didn't want Archie tied to a title that she felt carried connotations of dumb and ridicule. So if Charles truly intends to force Harry into becoming the Earl of Dumbarton, it's more than a downgrade. It's a deliberate insult. A reminder of the choices Meghan once scorned. Think about that. The very title Meghan dismissed for her child could now become the brand Harry is stuck with for the rest of his life. Isn't that irony sharp enough to cut glass? So here we are, at the edge of a royal cliff. Harry, the Duke of Sussex, facing the very real possibility of being recast as Harry, the Earl of Dumbarton. A man once celebrated, now threatened with demotion. A father once protective of his children, now forced to live under the shadow of a name his wife despised. A son once trusted by his family, now punished for his rebellion. But here's the question I'll leave you with for now. If the king truly dares to take away Harry's most prized title, what will Meghan do next? Because if history has shown us anything, it's that Meghan never takes a blow lying down. And the fallout from this could shake both Buckingham Palace and Hollywood. What does a title really mean for a man who walked away from the crown? Strip away the palaces, the uniforms, the pomp, and you're left with a name. A string of words that opens doors, commands respect, and stamps a person into history. For Harry, that name was the Duke of Sussex. It wasn't just a title. It was his identity. It was the one thing he carried even when he crossed the Atlantic, even when he turned his back on royal duty. But now, that very identity is dangling on the edge of a cliff. Let's start with the obvious. A dukedom is no ordinary label. It's the highest rank of nobility below the monarchy itself. When Queen Elizabeth granted Harry the title of Duke of Sussex on his wedding day in 2018, it was more than a gift. It was a crown of his own, a powerful symbol that said, "You matter. You belong. You are forever tied to this institution." It was a promise etched into law and tradition. And in those early days, it fit perfectly. The world loved the story, an army prince and an American actress becoming Duke and Duchess, shaking the dust off an ancient institution. Sussex wasn't just a title. It became a brand. Remember how quickly Harry and Meghan capitalized on it. The Instagram handle Sussex Royal, breaking records. The carefully crafted logos. The tours where crowds chanted their names. The Netflix and Spotify deals signed under that aura. The name carried weight in boardrooms, at charity galas, even in the political sphere. Strip away Sussex, and suddenly the spotlight dims. Suddenly, Harry isn't the man with the crown jewel title anymore. He's just another royal outcast. But here's the contradiction. While Harry held on to his dukedom, he also rejected the duties that came with it. He walked away from the family business, from royal life, from the very monarchy that made him duke. Isn't that ironic? Isn't that a contradiction sharp enough to split the family in two? He wanted the freedom of California, but the dignity of Sussex. He wanted to abandon the crown, but still be wrapped in its cloak. And that tension, that unresolved contradiction, sits at the heart of why Charles is allegedly ready to make his move. Ask yourself this. Can you really have both? Can you throw grenades at your family from across the Atlantic, sign billion-dollar deals on the back of your royal status, and still expect the monarchy to protect your dukedom? Most families wouldn't tolerate that level of hypocrisy. And Charles? He's not just a father. He's a king. For him, this is about more than Harry's feelings. This is about preserving the authority of the crown itself. And that's why the threat of stripping Harry's title is so explosive. Because it forces Harry to face a truth he's avoided for years, that without his royal name, he's just Harry. No dukedom, no Sussex brand, just Harry Windsor. Does that sound like a man who can still command Netflix, Spotify, and memoir deals? Does that sound like a man Hollywood will line up to embrace? Or does it sound like a man who becomes yesterday's news? But wait, there's more. Because the dukedom isn't just about Harry. It's about Meghan. For her, Duchess of Sussex is currency. It's a calling card she's used in Hollywood, in philanthropy, in politics. It's the very thing that sets her apart from any other actress, any other speaker, any other campaigner. Without it, she's Meghan Markle again. Talented, yes. Ambitious, yes. But not royal. Not Duchess. Not the woman who married into history. Do you think Meghan would stand by quietly as that title slipped away? Or do you think she'd fight, tooth and nail, to keep it? Picture the fury, the late-night strategy calls, the carefully timed leaks to the press. For Meghan, this isn't just Harry's battle. It's hers too. And in her world, losing Sussex isn't just a downgrade. It's an existential threat to the empire she's tried to build. And that brings us to the heart of the drama. The symbolic weight of Sussex versus the looming shadow of Dumbarton. Sussex is known worldwide. It's elegant. It's powerful. Dumbarton? It's obscure. Most people can't even find it on a map. Say it out loud. Duke of Sussex versus Earl of Dumbarton. Which one carries prestige? Which one gets the Hollywood handshake? Which one gets laughed at in late-night monologues? But let's not forget the sting of irony here. Dumbarton was once the title offered to Archie, Harry, and Meghan's son. And Meghan allegedly rejected it. Why? Because she thought the word sounded like dumb. Imagine that. A title dismissed as unworthy for their child, now hanging over Harry like a punishment. Isn't that poetic justice? Or is it cruel irony? You decide. And yet, titles are not just about status. They're about legacy. The dukedom ties Harry's children to the royal bloodline in ways that matter legally and historically. Strip it away, and suddenly Archie and Lilibet's future looks different. Their place in the pecking order shifts. Their inheritance of history itself changes. For Harry, this isn't just about his pride. It's about his children's destiny. Can you imagine the weight of that? But before we get carried away, let's pause. Because there's a deeper question here. What does Harry himself think? Does he care? Or has he convinced himself that titles don't matter, that he's free without them? He said before that he just wants to be Harry. But if that were true, why cling so fiercely to Sussex? Why brand himself and Meghan as Duke and Duchess in every interview, every project, every press release? The contradiction speaks for itself. Titles matter to Harry. They matter more than he admits. And that's why whispers of a private meeting hit so hard. Imagine Harry hearing, perhaps from a loyal aide, perhaps from Meghan herself, that the king was preparing to announce a demotion. Imagine the pit in his stomach. The shame. The fury. The helplessness. A man who once stood proudly on the balcony of Buckingham Palace reduced to wondering if his nameplate will soon read Dumbarton. And yet, that's exactly where we find ourselves. The dukedom of Sussex, the crown jewel of Harry's post-royal identity, dangling by a thread. His children's legacy at risk. Meghan's Hollywood brand under siege. His father ready to wield the axe. But the question lingers. How did Harry find out? Because in the world of royalty, bad news never travels in a straight line. And the whispers suggest it was a meeting unlike any other. One that set the stage for the most humiliating announcement of Harry's life. And that's where the story turns. Because Harry may have thought he had time. He may have believed his father would hesitate. But the truth? The truth came crashing down in the form of a private royal meeting that no one outside those gilded walls was supposed to hear about. But what was said in that room? And who exactly was there to witness it? That's the twist we uncover next. Picture it. A heavy wooden door shuts with a dull thud inside Clarence's house. The chatter outside fades, replaced by an almost suffocating silence. This isn't just another royal briefing. This isn't a ceremonial chat about upcoming tours or palace logistics. No, this is the meeting. The one whispered about in corridors, the one Harry never thought he'd be the subject of. Behind those doors, a father sits as a monarch, a son stands as a defendant, and history teeters on the edge of being rewritten. Who was in the room? That's the question that makes this moment so riveting. Reports suggest senior courtiers were summoned, trusted aides who have spent decades serving the crown, men and women who know exactly how delicate, how explosive these decisions can be. Some whisper William's name, hinting at his presence in the shadows of that meeting. Imagine it. The heir to the throne quietly observing, his every glance carrying years of tension, rivalry, and unspoken resentment. Was Kate's influence felt too, even if she wasn't physically there? After all, nothing major happens in the monarchy without strategic consultation. And at the head of the table sat King Charles. Not the father Harry once knew, laughing in the garden or guiding him through childhood grief. No, this was Charles in full monarch mode, cold, deliberate, and burdened by the weight of the crown. A man who has watched his son wage war against the family from across the Atlantic, airing secrets, writing books, making documentaries that felt like daggers pointed at the heart of the monarchy. For Charles, this wasn't just about a title. It was about authority. It was about restoring order. It was about proving that the crown still has teeth. The atmosphere was tense, like a courtroom where the verdict was already decided. Courtiers laid out the arguments. One side warning of public backlash if Harry were stripped of Sussex. Another side urging Charles to act, to show strength, to put an end to the constant undermining of the monarchy. And then there was the symbolic sting, the alternative title of Dumbarton. On paper, just a shift from one noble label to another. But in reality, a downgrade so sharp, so humiliating, that it would echo in headlines across the globe. Imagine Harry's reaction as whispers of this meeting reached him. Did his jaw clench? Did his fists tighten? Or did he simply sink into silence, realizing that the very thing he once took for granted, the dukedom tied to his wedding day, the title that carried Meghan's Hollywood ambitions, was slipping through his fingers? And let's not underestimate William's rumored role here. The rivalry between the brothers has never been subtle. From boyhood squabbles to adult estrangement, William has always been cast as the dutiful heir, Harry as the reckless spare. Could William have quietly supported the move, seeing it as necessary for the crown's survival? After all, William's future depends on the monarchy's strength. Weakness tolerated now could haunt his reign later. And what better way to demonstrate royal discipline than to make an example out of the one who rebelled the loudest? Now pause and ask yourself, what does this look like from Meghan's perspective? She wasn't in the room, but make no mistake, her presence was felt. Everyone knew that stripping Harry's dukedom would also strike at Meghan's carefully crafted image as Duchess of Sussex. Without that title, her speeches, her appearances, even her Hollywood projects would lose their glitter. The courtiers knew it. Charles knew it. William knew it. This wasn't just a blow to Harry. It was a calculated strike against Meghan too. And then came the moment of truth. After hours of discussion, speculation, and weighing consequences, Charles spoke. His voice steady, his tone deliberate, like a king passing judgment. He named the title that could replace Sussex. Not Kent, not Clarence, not another prestigious dukedom. No, he chose Dumbarton, a name steeped in obscurity, carrying none of the global recognition that Sussex commanded. A title Meghan once rejected for her son, believing it would subject him to ridicule. And now, that very name dangled over Harry's head like a sword. Can you feel the sting? The insult wasn't subtle. It was deliberate. Sussex was a crown jewel. Dumbarton was a downgrade. A silent rebuke etched into history. But here's the twist. This wasn't a public decree. Not yet. This was still a private decision, a discussion behind locked doors. Which makes the whispers all the more shocking. Because how did the details of this meeting escape the palace walls? Who leaked the word Dumbarton? Was it a disgruntled aide? Was it a deliberate trial balloon floated by the monarchy to test public reaction? Or was it someone closer to the throne, ensuring Harry felt the sting before the decision was even finalized? That's the question Harry had to ask himself as the whispers grew louder. His name, his title, his children's legacy, all debated in a room he wasn't even allowed to enter. And worse still, the world was beginning to find out before he could even process the blow. But what happens when whispers become reality? What happens when the obscure title of Dumbarton is no longer just a rumor, but the chosen replacement for Sussex? Because that was the next twist. The name wasn't just mentioned. It was declared. What's in a name? More than you think. Because in the monarchy, names and titles are everything. They are legacy, history, and status wrapped in a single phrase. And when it comes to the Duke of Sussex, the name itself carries centuries of power. But when you replace that with Earl of Dumbarton, the shift isn't just cosmetic, it's a seismic drop in prestige. And that's why this revelation cuts so deep. Let's peel it back. The Dukedom of Sussex wasn't a random choice in 2018. When Queen Elizabeth bestowed it on Harry, she was following a long tradition of granting a senior royal son a prestigious dukedom upon marriage. The title had been dormant for more than 150 years, waiting in the royal vault like a crown jewel. Sussex was a county tied to deep English history, culture, and nobility. And in giving it to Harry, the Queen made a statement. Despite being the spare, Harry mattered. He was significant. He was forever stamped into the royal record with a title that resonated across the world. Contrast that with Dumbarton, an earldom, a secondary title, lesser in rank, lesser in recognition, and virtually unknown to most of the globe. How many people, before this drama, could even point to Dumbarton on a map? It doesn't carry the same gravitas. It doesn't command headlines. Say Duke of Sussex, and you think of grandeur. Say Earl of Dumbarton, and most people blink in confusion. It's like being demoted from CEO of a Fortune 500 company to manager of a small-town branch office. Same suit, same surname, but nowhere near the same impact. And here's the dagger in the heart. Meghan Markle herself reportedly rejected the Dumbarton title for her son Archie. Back when he was born, there were discussions that Archie could be styled as Earl of Dumbarton. But Meghan was said to have bristled at the idea. Why? Because of the word dumb. She feared her child would be teased, ridiculed, diminished. So she dismissed it, preferring to keep Archie untitled. Can you imagine the irony now? The very name she rejected as unworthy for her child could be the one forced upon her husband. That's not just irony. That's humiliation carefully designed by fate, or perhaps by the monarchy itself. Think about the symbolism. Sussex was global. Dumbarton is local. Sussex meant prestige, influence, and an international platform. Dumbarton reduces Harry's identity to a footnote, tethered to a minor earldom, stripped of the grandeur he once carried with every handshake and introduction. To Meghan, who built her brand on the cachet of Duchess of Sussex, this is a nightmare. Imagine her on the red carpet, introduced as the Duchess of Dumbarton. Does it carry the same sparkle? Would Hollywood executives whisper about the Dumbartons with the same awe as the Sussexes? Of course not. And Meghan knows it. That's why this isn't just a demotion. It's a direct strike at their carefully curated global identity. But the history runs even deeper. The first Duke of Sussex was Prince Augustus Frederick, the sixth son of King George III. He was known for defying convention, for marrying without royal consent, for challenging the rigid traditions of the monarchy. In a way, Harry being Duke of Sussex was poetic, another rebellious prince carrying the same banner. By stripping him of Sussex, Charles isn't just demoting Harry. He's severing that symbolic link to rebellion with honor. He's saying, your defiance is not noble. It is not history repeating itself. It is a disgrace, and you will not carry the Sussex name. Meanwhile, the Dumbarton earldom carries no such legacy. It was created in 1675 for George Douglas, a Scottish noble, but has remained obscure, almost forgotten in modern times. In giving Harry that title, Charles would be effectively exiling him to obscurity. Think of it like being erased from the marquee of history, from bold print to fine print, from headline to footnote. And here's another twist. Titles matter not just for Harry, but for his children. Right now, Archie and Lilibet are Prince and Princess of Sussex. But if Harry is demoted, what happens to them? Do they become Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet of Dumbarton? Imagine the ridicule. Imagine Meghan's fury. This isn't just about Harry. It's about the future of his bloodline. His children's place in the royal hierarchy could be forever altered by this decision. But let's not gloss over Harry's personal pride. Remember, this is a man who walked behind his mother's coffin as a boy, who served in Afghanistan as a soldier, who once held the admiration of millions. He was the people's prince, beloved, untouchable. And now, to be reduced to the Earl of Dumbarton? Can you picture the shame? The headlines mocking him? The social media chatter laughing at the downgrade? For Harry, it isn't just a title. It's a scarlet letter. It's the monarchy stamping him as less than, as diminished, as irrelevant. And yet, some would argue Harry brought this on himself. By stepping away, by signing Hollywood deals, by airing family grievances in interviews and books, he distanced himself from the very institution that gave him his power. Can you really claim the prestige of Sussex if you're also dismantling the monarchy brick by brick? Charles, it seems, is answering that question for him, with a firm no. But here's where the drama intensifies. Because Meghan's alleged reaction to the word Dumbarton was explosive, furious, almost volcanic. She reportedly couldn't stomach the thought of such a downgrade, not just for Harry, but for herself. Imagine the conversations in Montecito that night. Imagine the slammed doors, the tense silence, the whispered strategy sessions. Meghan, the woman who built her identity as Duchess of Sussex, suddenly forced to accept Duchess of Dumbarton? That's not just a downgrade. It's an insult. It's a branding disaster. And yet, palace insiders say Charles didn't flinch. He didn't hesitate. He let the word hang in the air like a verdict. Dumbarton. The name Meghan once rejected. The title Harry never wanted. The punishment no one saw coming. But this was only the beginning. Because if Meghan's fury was loud, the palace aides' descriptions of her behind-the-scenes reaction were even louder. And what they revealed next would send shockwaves across both Buckingham Palace and Hollywood. Fury. That's the word that echoed through the walls of Montecito when Meghan first heard the whispers of Dumbarton. Not disappointment. Not confusion. Fury. A fire so fierce it scorched everything around her. For Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex title wasn't just a formality. It was her golden armor. Her ticket into elite circles. Her shield against critics who once dismissed her as just an actress. And now, to hear that the monarchy was ready to strip that armor away and replace it with a name she'd once rejected, that wasn't just insulting. That was war. Let's be brutally honest. Meghan has always been acutely aware of optics. She knows the value of image, brand, and presentation. She's built her career on it. When she walked down the aisle at Windsor in 2018, she wasn't just marrying Harry. She was marrying into an institution that gave her the kind of global platform Hollywood never could. Overnight, Meghan Markle became Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. It was a transformation so dramatic that no publicist in Los Angeles could have orchestrated it better. And Meghan leaned into it. Think about it. Every interview, every project, every contract, they all highlighted the title. Duchess of Sussex. It wasn't just a role. It was her identity. So now, imagine Meghan being told that identity was about to change. That instead of Duchess of Sussex, she would be Duchess of Dumbarton. Does that sound glamorous to you? Does that roll off the tongue with the same prestige? Or does it sound like a downgrade, a punchline waiting to be mocked? Meghan knew the answer instantly, and she despised it. And here's the kicker. This wasn't the first time Dumbarton had been on the table. Back in 2019, when Archie was born, the option of styling him as Earl of Dumbarton was discussed. Meghan reportedly recoiled at the thought. She didn't want her son associated with a name that, in her eyes, sounded ridiculous. Dumb. The potential for schoolyard taunts was too much. She rejected it outright. So to now hear that her husband might be saddled with that very name? To Meghan, it wasn't just a demotion. It was a deliberate humiliation. A slap in the face from the institution she had already accused of racism, coldness, and cruelty. Now, let's picture the scene in Montecito that night. Harry pacing the room, running his hands through his hair. Meghan, furious, venting about the insult, strategizing out loud. Maybe there were slammed doors. Maybe there were tense silences. But one thing's for sure, Meghan was already calculating her next move. Because if the monarchy thought it could silence her with a downgrade, they had underestimated her. She knows how to fight back, not with swords or crowns, but with the weapons of the modern age: media, publicity, and narrative control. And that's where things get interesting. Behind closed doors, palace aides reportedly described Meghan's reaction as volcanic. She wasn't just upset. She was livid. She saw it as a direct attack on her personally, not just on Harry. After all, Harry may lose his dukedom, but Meghan would lose her Duchess brand. For her, the stakes weren't symbolic. They were tangible. This was about her future earning power, her influence, her image in Hollywood and beyond. Let me ask you directly. What would you do if someone tried to strip away the very title that gave you status, wealth, and power? Would you accept it quietly? Or would you fight with every tool at your disposal? Meghan, without question, was ready to fight. And what tools does she have? Oh, plenty. The Netflix deals, the Hollywood connections, the loyal media allies who've painted her as a victim of the monarchy's cruelty before. Meghan knows how to spin a narrative. She's done it before, and she could do it again. If Charles thought stripping the Sussex title would silence Harry and Meghan, he might have unleashed the opposite. A wave of new interviews, new documentaries, new revelations, all framed around the cruel monarchy stripping titles in an act of revenge. But here's the twist. Meghan's fury wasn't just about herself. She was thinking of her children too. Archie and Lilibet. What would it mean for them if their parents were no longer Duke and Duchess of Sussex? Would they grow up with diminished recognition? Would they become targets of ridicule as the Dumbarton kids? Meghan wasn't about to let that happen without a fight. In her mind, this wasn't just about a title. It was about protecting her family's legacy. Now pause for a moment and consider the irony. The monarchy, by trying to diminish Harry and Meghan, might actually amplify them. Because the public loves drama. They love conflict. And what better story than the king strips his son of his title and Meghan strikes back? This isn't just royal politics. This is theater. And Meghan, whether you love her or hate her, knows exactly how to play a starring role. Still, behind the fiery determination, there was a sting of humiliation. Meghan prided herself on stepping into the royal family and modernizing it, shaking it up, making it more relatable. She saw herself as a force of progress. And now, to be told she wasn't Duchess of Sussex anymore, but Duchess of Dumbarton? That felt like the monarchy reducing her to nothing. A deliberate attempt to erase her mark on history. And Meghan couldn't stomach it. But let's not forget Harry in all this. Watching his wife unravel in fury, watching her brand crumble in real time. What must that have felt like? Guilt? Shame? Anger at his father? Or a burning determination to stand by Meghan and fight alongside her? Because one thing is certain, Harry has never abandoned Meghan in public. And if Meghan is furious, Harry will be too. That's what makes this story so volatile. Yet, as the palace aides whispered about Meghan's behind-the-scenes reaction, one detail stood out above the rest. Something so shocking, so revealing, that it painted Meghan's fury in an even darker, more explosive light. Because what Meghan allegedly said next would not only rattle Buckingham Palace, it would send shockwaves across Hollywood, the press, and even within her own family. But what exactly did she say? And how far was she willing to go in her fight to keep Sussex? The wedding day, May 19th, 2018. The sun was shining on Windsor Castle, the crowds were roaring, the cameras were rolling. It was the kind of spectacle only the British monarchy could stage. Harry and Meghan stood on the steps of St. George's Chapel, waving to a world that couldn't look away. And at the end of that glittering ceremony, Queen Elizabeth bestowed a gift that would shape the rest of Harry's life, the Dukedom of Sussex. It wasn't just a title. It was history. The dukedom had been dormant for over a century, untouched since the 1800s, waiting for someone to revive it. And on that day, it was handed to Harry, along with all the prestige, symbolism, and recognition that came with it. From that moment on, he wasn't just Prince Harry. He was His Royal Highness the Duke of Sussex. And Meghan became the Duchess. It was a crown of their own, a way of telling the world, this couple matters. They are part of the royal machine. They carry the weight of history on their shoulders. Now think of the contrast. Flash forward to today. Instead of glittering headlines celebrating the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, whispers swirl of a humiliating downgrade to Earl and Countess of Dumbarton. From a crown jewel to a discarded trinket. From history-making grandeur to quiet obscurity. The irony is so sharp it almost feels like satire. Let's not underestimate what that wedding meant. It wasn't just a union between Harry and Meghan. It was a global moment, watched by billions, celebrated as a merging of tradition and modernity. Meghan, the American actress, walked into a 1,000-year-old institution and seemed to breathe new life into it. And the Queen's granting of the Sussex dukedom was the final seal of approval. It told the world, Meghan belongs. Harry has his place. Together, they are Sussex. And the public bought into it. Sussex became a brand. Remember the Sussex Royal Instagram account? It gained over 1 million followers in record time. The Sussex Royal Foundation was launched to great fanfare. Every charity visit, every overseas tour, every speech, they all carried the stamp of Sussex. The name wasn't just ceremonial. It was the very foundation of Harry and Meghan's identity. So why is the idea of losing it so devastating? Because it's not just about words. It's about memory. It's about legacy. It's about the difference between being immortalized in history as Sussex, the couple who modernized the monarchy, and being brushed aside as Dumbarton, a footnote few will even remember. Now picture Meghan reflecting on that wedding day. The carriage rides, the cheering crowds, the Queen's approval, the global headlines calling her the Duchess of Sussex. And then imagine her looking at today's headlines. Stripped, downgraded, demoted. Do you feel the sting? That's the humiliation Charles's move threatens to unleash. But it gets worse. Because the wedding wasn't just a day of joy. It was also a day of expectation. When the Queen handed Harry the dukedom, it came with strings. With responsibility. With duty. And here's the bitter truth. Harry didn't fulfill those duties. He walked away. He moved to California. He signed Hollywood deals. He wrote a memoir that blasted his family. He gave interviews that exposed palace secrets. The very title that was meant to symbolize loyalty became the foundation for rebellion. And therein lies the cruel irony. The wedding day gave Harry his crown jewel, but it also planted the seed of his downfall. Because by accepting Sussex, he tied his identity to the monarchy forever. And by rejecting the monarchy, he set himself on a collision course with the very institution that had crowned him. But here's the real kicker. While Sussex was once celebrated, it is now weaponized. Every time Harry and Meghan appear on screen, critics sneer. They want the privileges without the responsibilities. Every time Meghan introduces herself as Duchess of Sussex, the tabloids groan. They're exploiting the monarchy. The brand that once lifted them is now a lightning rod for criticism. So ask yourself this. Would losing the Sussex title really destroy them? Or would it finally set them free? On one hand, it would strip them of prestige, branding power, and global recognition. On the other, it might silence critics who accuse them of clinging to royal privilege. But would Meghan ever allow that? Would Harry ever accept being reduced to Dumbarton? Or would the loss ignite an even greater war between Montecito and Buckingham Palace? And then there's the public. Remember the euphoria of that wedding? People cheering, waving flags, crying with joy. Now picture those same crowds hearing that Harry might lose his title. Would they celebrate his downfall? Or would they sympathize with a man punished for following his heart? Public opinion is fickle. And Charles's gamble could backfire spectacularly if people see it as cruelty rather than justice. But the story doesn't end with nostalgia or irony. Because just when it seemed the downgrade was bad enough, palace insiders revealed something else. That the Sussex's wedding day triumph might not just be overshadowed, but deliberately inverted. That the same monarchy that once crowned Harry Duke could now erase that chapter altogether. And what came next in Charles's decision would not only strip Harry of his title, it would sting like a personal betrayal, a father turning his back on a son in the most public way possible. Rationale. That was the word echoing in the chambers of Buckingham Palace. King Charles wasn't acting on impulse. He wasn't simply punishing his son out of spite. No, at least not on the surface. Every move was calculated, deliberate, framed with centuries of royal precedent in mind. To Charles, stripping Harry of his dukedom wasn't cruelty. It was necessity. Let's get to the core of it. The monarchy survives on perception, authority, continuity. If the crown appears weak, divided, or irrelevant, it risks collapse. That's why every decision a monarch makes is scrutinized not just by subjects, but by history itself. And Charles knows this better than anyone. He's waited his entire life to be king, watched scandals nearly destroy the institution, and endured decades of criticism himself. He isn't about to let his son undermine everything he spent a lifetime preparing to inherit. So why Sussex? Why now? Think of the damage Harry has already inflicted. The Oprah interview where he and Meghan accused unnamed royals of racism. The Netflix docuseries that aired palace grievances like Dirty Laundry. The memoir Spare, where Harry painted his brother William as violent, his father Charles as distant, his stepmother Camilla as dangerous. These weren't harmless jabs. They were daggers, each one slicing at the monarchy's dignity. And through it all, Harry did it while still clinging to the name Duke of Sussex. Ask yourself, how does that look to the world? A man tearing down the monarchy while carrying its badge of honor. Isn't that like someone torching their old workplace while still wearing the company uniform? The contradiction was glaring, and for Charles, it was intolerable. But there was another factor, duty. For Charles, this wasn't just about punishing Harry. It was about setting an example. What message does it send if a royal can walk away, profit off the monarchy, drag its name through the mud, and still keep one of the most prestigious dukedoms in the realm? It tells the world that rebellion is rewarded. And Charles couldn't allow that. Not as king. Not with the survival of the crown on the line. Yet here's the irony. Beneath the official reasoning, there was something personal. Charles may wear the crown, but he is also a father. And what father could truly forget the sting of betrayal? Harry didn't just criticize the monarchy, he criticized his father. He aired private conversations, mocked Charles's parenting, painted him as cold and unfeeling. Even kings bleed when their children wound them. And Charles bled. That's why this decision wasn't just strategic. It was emotional. It was a father drawing a line in the sand. And still, the king had to balance precedent with perception. Stripping titles is rare. Painfully rare. It doesn't happen lightly, because once a title is taken, history remembers it forever. Look at Edward VIII. The king who abdicated for love, stripped of the style, his majesty, and relegated to Duke of Windsor. Or Prince Andrew, who lost his HRH status after scandal engulfed him. Each time, the monarchy sent a clear message. Disgrace has consequences. And now, Charles was preparing to add Harry to that short, infamous list. But here's where the emotional buildup hits hardest. Because Charles's rationale wasn't only about optics or tradition. It was about control. The monarchy is built on the idea that the crown is bigger than any individual. Even a son. Even a prince. And by stripping Harry of Sussex, Charles was reasserting that control, reminding the world, and his family, that the throne commands obedience, not compromise. Still, pause and think. How must this feel for Harry? To know his father sat in judgment not as dad, but as king. To realize the man who once held his hand through childhood grief was now prepared to erase his royal identity. The contradiction is heartbreaking. The father's love crushed by the monarch's duty. Can you imagine being in Harry's shoes? Would you feel betrayed? Humiliated? Or would you finally accept that walking away came with a cost you could no longer avoid? But Harry wasn't the only one suffering in silence. Because behind this decision was another shadow, William, the heir to the throne. Charles's rationale wasn't just about himself. It was about protecting William's future reign. Every scandal Harry dragged into the spotlight risked staining William's crown before he even wore it. By cutting Harry down now, Charles wasn't just punishing the spare. He was protecting the heir. And that's what makes this moment so tragic. A family torn apart by love, duty, and betrayal. A king forced to choose between his role and his son. A father turning cold because warmth could no longer protect the crown. But here's the sting. The demotion to Dumbarton wasn't just punishment. It was humiliation. A decision crafted not just to discipline Harry, but to wound him. Because the very name Meghan once rejected, the title dismissed as unworthy, was now the one chosen to define Harry's future. Was that coincidence? Or was that Charles twisting the knife? And when Harry heard the verdict, when he realized his dukedom was slipping away, the emotional collapse was inevitable. The strong soldier, the rebellious prince, the global celebrity, reduced in a single word. Dumbarton. But if you think Harry's collapse was the end of the story, think again. Because what came next was even more shocking. Meghan's reaction wasn't just fury. It was strategy. And whispers suggest she wasn't about to let this decision stand without unleashing a storm of her own. Identity. That's what this battle is really about. For Harry, losing Duke of Sussex isn't just losing a ceremonial title. It's losing the last anchor to who he once was. Imagine the weight of that. For years, Harry has been called many things. The spare, the soldier, the rebel, the husband, the runaway royal. But through it all, he was the Duke of Sussex. That title grounded him. It gave him legitimacy when he walked away from the monarchy. It gave him credibility when he faced Hollywood executives. It gave him a shield when critics mocked his decisions. Without it, who is he? Let's take a step back. Harry has always struggled with identity. From the moment he was born, he lived in William's shadow. The heir versus the spare. William was destined for the throne, groomed from birth, polished and prepared. Harry was the spare tire, necessary, but always secondary. That kind of label can break a person. And it did. It drove him into rebellion, into wild years of partying, into desperate attempts to prove himself as something more than William's backup. Then came the army. For a while, Harry found purpose there. He was respected not as a prince, but as a soldier. In Afghanistan, he felt like an equal among his brothers in arms. That was the closest Harry ever came to an identity outside the royal bubble. But when he left the army, that sense of self evaporated. He drifted again, lost, restless, trying to figure out who he was without a uniform or a crown. And then Meghan entered his life. With her came love, passion, and a shared desire to escape the suffocating palace walls. Together, they reinvented themselves. And at the center of that reinvention was the Sussex title. It gave Harry the credibility to build a new life in California. It gave Meghan the brand recognition she needed to step onto the world stage. It wasn't just a title, it was their new identity as a couple. Now strip that away. Reduce him to Earl of Dumbarton. What happens then? The fragile identity Harry has built comes crashing down. He isn't just Harry anymore. He's diminished, downgraded, marked as lesser. And for a man who has always battled insecurities, that's devastating. Can you imagine the personal crisis this would trigger? Harry has spoken openly about his struggles with mental health, about feeling trapped, about living in Diana's shadow. Losing his title could push him back into those dark places. For Harry, the dukedom isn't just about status. It's about self-worth. Without it, does he even know who he is? But there's another layer here. Meghan. Harry may be willing to call himself just Harry, but Meghan? Meghan has built her entire identity around being Duchess of Sussex. She introduced herself as such in interviews, in Hollywood meetings, in political circles. For her, the title is a crown she wears proudly. It gives her an edge, a sparkle, a weight that sets her apart. If Harry loses it, she loses it too. And that's not something Meghan will accept quietly. So what does Harry do? Does he fight? Does he retreat? Does he crumble under the weight of yet another identity crisis? History tells us Harry doesn't take blows well. When the press hounded him, he lashed out. When William tried to pull him back, he distanced himself. When the monarchy boxed him in, he fled to California. Every time Harry has been cornered, he's chosen flight over fight. But this is different. Because this time, it isn't just about him. It's about Meghan. It's about Archie and Lilibet. It's about the family he's chosen to build outside the palace walls. And here's where it gets emotional. Titles aren't just names, they're legacies. If Harry loses Sussex, his children lose it too. Archie and Lilibet would no longer be Prince and Princess of Sussex. They would be tied to Dumbarton instead. Can you imagine the sting for Meghan? To see her children saddled with a title she once rejected? To watch them grow up carrying a name she associates with humiliation? That, more than anything, could break her. Direct question for you. If you were Harry, would you accept that? Would you stand by and watch your children inherit a title designed to diminish you? Or would you fight to protect them, even if it meant going to war with your own father? That's the crisis Harry faces. His identity, his children's future, Meghan's brand, all of it tied to a single word, Sussex. And now that word hangs by a thread. But whispers say Meghan isn't leaving the fight in Harry's hands. While he wrestled with identity, she was already plotting a counterattack. PR strategies, media allies, Hollywood connections. Meghan's fury was volcanic, but her strategy? Calculated. And if Charles thought stripping Sussex would end the war, he may have just provoked the biggest battle yet. Because behind the scenes, Meghan's so-called revenge plan was already taking shape, and it threatened to drag not just Charles, but William, Kate, and the entire monarchy into the crossfire. Strategy. That's what Meghan does best. For all the fury that boiled beneath the surface, for all the slammed doors and sharp words in Montecito, Meghan wasn't about to waste her energy on blind rage. No, she was already thinking 3 steps ahead. Because if King Charles wanted to strip her of Duchess of Sussex, she would make sure the world saw it not as discipline, but as cruelty. And Meghan knows better than anyone that in today's world, perception is power. Let's talk about her playbook. Meghan has always been adept at turning setbacks into narratives. Remember the Oprah interview? One appearance flipped the royal story on its head. Instead of the monarchy painting Harry and Meghan as deserters, Meghan painted herself as a victim of coldness, racism, and neglect. Millions watched, millions sympathized. Overnight, the power dynamic shifted. That's her gift, controlling the story. And now, with Dumbarton looming, she knew exactly what she had to do: reframe it. Behind closed doors, Meghan's alleged PR strategy began to take shape. Step 1. Leaks. Carefully timed insider quotes to friendly journalists, painting the move as vindictive. Words like punishment, revenge, and humiliation would seep into headlines, framing Charles not as a dignified king, but as a bitter father trying to crush his son and daughter-in-law. Step 2. Interviews. Meghan knows her voice resonates. She doesn't even have to name the palace outright. She can simply talk about the cruelty of being stripped of your identity and let the public connect the dots. Step 3. Hollywood. Every dinner, every gala, every red carpet appearance becomes an opportunity to remind elites in Los Angeles and New York that she is the victim of an outdated monarchy trying to silence her. But that wasn't all. Meghan had legal options, too. While titles are a matter of the crown, not the courts, Meghan could use lawsuits in adjacent battles, against tabloids, against leaks, to keep her name in the headlines, always linked to injustice, always painting herself and Harry as under siege. Every court filing, every press release becomes another weapon in the broader war. And here's where the emotional spikes come in. Meghan doesn't just fight for herself. She fights for her children. Every narrative, every interview, every soundbite would circle back to Archie and Lilibet. Imagine her words. My children are being punished for choices they didn't make. Their legacy is being stripped away because their father dared to follow his heart. Can you hear it? Can you feel how powerful that narrative would be? It reframes the entire debate. Suddenly, it's not about Harry losing Sussex. It's about innocent children being targeted by a vengeful crown. That's the kind of story the public rallies behind. And yet, there's a darker side. Meghan's fury wasn't just about titles. It was about respect. For years, she's fought to be seen as more than just an actress who married a prince. She's fought for recognition as a leader, a philanthropist, a force in her own right. To lose Sussex now would feel like erasure, a deliberate attempt to reduce her back to Meghan Markle, as though the years of struggle, the sacrifices, the trauma she endured in the palace meant nothing. For Meghan, that wasn't just an insult. It was intolerable. Ask yourself, would you take that lying down? Or would you unleash every tool at your disposal to fight back? Meghan's answer was clear. She would fight. With words. With influence. With strategy. But here's where the twist enters. Meghan wasn't alone in this battle. Because across the Atlantic, palace insiders whispered that William's shadow loomed large over Charles's decision. That William, the dutiful heir, quietly supported stripping Harry of Sussex to protect the monarchy's reputation. And if Meghan was already furious at Charles, the thought of William's hand in the decision turned her fury into something darker, something more personal. Because let's be honest, the rivalry between Meghan and William isn't just about titles. It's about family. Meghan has always known that William and Kate represented everything she and Harry were not: stability, duty, popularity. If William truly supported the demotion, Meghan would see it not just as a royal decision, but as a betrayal by her brother-in-law. And in her world, betrayals demand consequences. So what comes next? Meghan's PR machine against William's silent influence. Montecito versus Kensington Palace. A battle not just for titles, but for public sympathy, media dominance, and the future image of the monarchy itself. But here's the cliffhanger. What if William's role wasn't silent at all? What if, behind those closed doors, he wasn't just watching, but actively pushing for Harry's demotion? What if William himself made the case for Dumbarton? Imagine William in that room. Not as the older brother Harry once idolized, not as the boy who walked beside him behind Diana's coffin, but as the heir, the future king, calmly calculating the risks and rewards of stripping his brother of Sussex. Cold, deliberate, purposeful. It's almost unthinkable, isn't it? Yet palace whispers suggest that William's fingerprints might be all over this move. Let's break it down. William has spent his entire life preparing for the throne. Every decision he makes now is filtered through one lens. How will this affect his reign? To him, the monarchy isn't just family, it's destiny. And Harry? Harry has become a threat to that destiny. Every interview, every documentary, every passage of Spare was a knife aimed not just at Charles, but at William. Harry accused him of being violent, of being cold, of being complicit in the monarchy's cruelty. Those accusations don't just damage William as a brother. They damage him as the future king. So ask yourself, why wouldn't William want Harry cut down to size? Why wouldn't he quietly support the decision to strip his brother of the dukedom that gave him global relevance? From William's perspective, it isn't spite. It's strategy. Remove Sussex, and you remove Harry's platform. Reduce him to Dumbarton, and you reduce his influence. The heir strengthens by weakening the Spare. It's ruthless, yes, but isn't ruthlessness the hallmark of survival in royal history? Now, let's add Kate into the equation. While she wasn't in the room, her influence on William can't be underestimated. Kate has built her reputation on stability, dignity, and loyalty. She knows that every scandal involving Harry and Meghan casts a shadow over her own image as future queen. Would she have nudged William towards supporting Charles's move? Would she have whispered, in those private husband and wife conversations, that the monarchy can't afford to let Harry keep Sussex? It's not hard to imagine. And here's the emotional gut punch. For Harry, hearing that William might have backed the demotion would feel like the deepest betrayal yet. He could forgive his father acting as king. But his brother? The boy he once called his best mate? The man he fought alongside in grief and duty? That would cut deeper than any insult from Charles. It would confirm what Harry has long feared, that William chose the crown over him. That blood doesn't matter when the throne is at stake. But William would see it differently. He'd see it as protecting the monarchy, protecting his father, protecting his own children's future. He'd argue that Harry made his choice when he left, when he aired grievances to Oprah, when he published Spare. William didn't betray Harry. Harry betrayed the monarchy. And in William's eyes, that betrayal deserves consequence. Now think about how this plays in public. Imagine the tabloids. William stands firm against Harry. Imagine the Netflix documentaries Meghan could produce in response. William, the betrayer. The narrative war would be brutal. William, painted as the cold heir sacrificing his brother for duty. Harry, painted as the victim of a ruthless sibling. Which story wins? That depends on who controls the microphone. And Meghan? Meghan has no intention of surrendering that microphone without a fight. And here's where it gets even more chilling. Whispers suggest that during the meeting, when the option of Dumbarton was raised, William didn't flinch. He didn't protest. He didn't defend Harry. Instead, he allegedly nodded in agreement. Silent support. A gesture small enough to be overlooked, but heavy enough to crush Harry if he ever found out. Picture Harry discovering that detail. Picture him asking himself, did my brother sit there and watch my identity be stripped from me? Did he silently agree to erase Sussex from my name? Can you feel the heartbreak in that realization? Can you feel the rage it would spark? But the story doesn't stop with William. Because just when the tension seemed unbearable, another name entered the conversation. Not Charles, not William, not Meghan. The name of the Queen, Elizabeth II. Her legacy, her promise, her shadow looming over the meeting like a ghost. And invoking her name changed everything. The Queen, even in death, her presence hangs heavy over every decision the monarchy makes. Elizabeth II was more than just a monarch. She was the anchor, the matriarch, the embodiment of stability. For 70 years, her word was law, her judgment the final say. So when whispers say her name was invoked during the meeting about Harry's dukedom, it wasn't just symbolism. It was strategy. Because once you bring Elizabeth into the conversation, everything changes. Think about it. Elizabeth's reign was defined by duty above all else. She lived and breathed the mantra, I must be seen to be believed. She sacrificed personal happiness for the stability of the crown. She endured scandals, betrayals, even family heartbreaks. And through it all, she never wavered. To her, the monarchy always came first. Always. So ask yourself, what would the Queen have thought of Harry's rebellion? Of the Oprah interview, the Netflix deals, the memoir? Would she have tolerated it? Or would she have agreed with Charles that Sussex should be stripped to preserve the dignity of the crown? Some palace aides insist she would never have allowed it. That Elizabeth's softer, grandmotherly heart would have stepped in, reminding Charles that Harry was her grandson before he was a duke. That titles, once given, should not be so easily taken back. After all, wasn't she the one who made sure Harry and Meghan kept Sussex even after they walked away in 2020? She could have removed it then, but she didn't. Was that mercy? Or was it hesitation? Others argue the opposite. They claim Elizabeth, who lived through the abdication crisis of Edward VIII, understood better than anyone the danger of royals breaking away and undermining the monarchy. She knew how much damage one defiant royal could do. And Harry? With his interviews, his accusations, his relentless criticism, he was beginning to look like Edward all over again.